So, here's the thing about me. I really like Fire Emblem. Anyone who knows me well enough is at least somewhat aware with how deep my love for Fire Emblem goes. It is a fantastic strategy RPG series that has almost anything you would expect it to include, and then some. It has engaging turn-based battles, political drama of continental scale, moral dilemmas, fantastic character building, protecting people no matter their significance, and incest. But before all those ideas made up the defining traits of the series, there's the place where Fire Emblem first started. Let us go back and take a look at the humble beginnings of this now greatly renowned franchise. Before we can talk about Fire Emblem, it's important to look at its spiritual predecessor, Famicom Wars. This battle simulation was developed by Intelligent Systems and released from the Nintendo Famicom in 1988. It was a simple strategy game where a player could control one of two armies. Every unit could be moved individually, with the goal of capturing the enemy base. That was all the context that was given, but perhaps not what was needed. During the development, one employee asked a simple question. What would Famicom Wars be like if it was a greater ordeal, involving characters and a story? This designer was Shozo Kaga, who began working on the idea for Intelligent Systems as a sort of side project alongside Famicom Wars. While not the lead producer or director, Kaga is known as the father of Fire Emblem. As the development progressed, the idea was pitched to Nintendo as a new release. This would be the game known as Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, releasing in Japan on April 20th, 1990. Go on. You know what you want to say. I'll allow it. The original reception was lukewarm, to say it lightly. The game was critically panned by reviewers for its ugly visual design and difficult to understand gameplay. This translated to poor launch sales, but in a twist of fate, a couple months after the release, word of mouth began to surface, and Fire Emblem saw a sales spike. Such is the story on how a small project made for fun became something for Intelligent Systems to pay attention to. Fire Emblem is often credited for being the origin of the tactical RPGs we know today. However, since I am neither Japanese nor an old man, I do not have any personal history with the first game specifically. As you can probably tell by just looking at the game, it is also quite old, and considering it was a somewhat clunky game when it originally released, people would tell you that it has not aged well. Let us also not forget the majesty of classic Marth. However, to commemorate the Famicom's 25th anniversary, a remake of the classic title was put into development and released for the Nintendo DS in 2009 for North American audiences. I would like to play the original version of the game for historical sake at some point, but history shall not be represented today. This will be the version of the game I will primarily discuss, as it's undeniably the most playable version of the game. On the continent of Arcanea, an evil dragon named Medeus was evil and wanted to kill people for evil. But an Altean champion by the name of Henri used a sword known as Falchion to smite the evil dragon and restore peace to the world. A couple generations pass and Medeus is revived by the evil sorcerer Garneth, and the world is plunged into despair once more. This time the grandson of Henri, Cornelius, takes his Falchion and leads the army of Altea to defeat the dragon once again. However, an ally of Cornelius, the nation of Gra, betrays Altea, which turns the tides of war for the worse. You take control of Marth, the current prince of Altea. When Gra soldiers come to kill the young prince, Marth fights his way through the castle. It is only after meeting up with his father's soldiers that Marth learns his father was killed by Gra, with Falchion being stolen from Altea. Don't feel too bad, Marth. It's not a Fire Emblem game unless your dad dies. Taking refuge on the island of Talus, Marth spends his time training to be a warrior, worthy of reclaiming his homeland. 2 years after his escape, the young lord returns to the mainland in search of allies who are willing to support his cause. One of these allies comes to be the nation of Arcanea, not to be confused with the continent of Arcanea, whose very own Princess Nina bestows Marth with the Fire Emblem, as a symbol of the champion who will restore the continent to its former glory and defeat Medeus once again. It's an alright story, I guess, but it's unfortunate that the narrative overall is pretty weak. It's a good thing that Fire Emblem tried to tackle what were more Unique themes and goals for the time, but even so, it's hard to praise that when I wasn't around then. I'm not expecting War and Peace from a game that was originally released for the Famicom in 1990, and I wasn't expecting the remake to overhaul everything about it. It's an awkward situation, as other future remakes would tackle a different philosophy with what I feel resulted in greater success. The remake expands upon the dialogue of the original game, along with adding brand new prologue chapters to flesh out the context. The new chapters are a great addition, but the expansions of the pre-existing dialogue are pretty underwhelming. I feel it just ends up saying more words without using that to add anything substantial. This is not necessarily a story that will keep you engaged, and may end up moving way too fast or be way too unfocused to properly follow. By the end, things manage to even out at a decent pace, but it feels like the damage is already done. Even if Shadow Dragon doesn't have the most interesting setup, there are ways it could have been redeemed. The prologue chapters are some of the best written in the game, as it puts emphasis on the characters and building Marth's resolve. But nowhere else in the game does it really decide to do anything about it. It's sad to say, but our iconic Marth doesn't have a compelling story to tell, at least not for his first time around. But in the end, I'm not all that upset. I value the Fire Emblem games less for their stories and more for their gameplay. In case you have no idea what Fire Emblem is, then allow me the honors. They are grid-based tactical games with role-playing elements. If Famicom Wars or Advance Wars was a fantasy RPG, Fire Emblem is exactly what it would be like. If you can't relate to that, think of a smaller scale game of Civilization or XCOM, or even a game of chess where you can move all your units in one turn. That is the basic flow of combat. Your primary function for each unit is to select them and move them over to the enemy and engage in battle. You will strike first, followed by your enemy's counterattack. Reverse the roles if it's the enemy's turn. Fire Emblem battles are interesting because they do not play out in absolutes. Both units will have a specific hit rate depending on their stats and what terrain they're standing on. Unless the hit rate is 100%, there will always be a chance that either could miss their strike. This could be your greatest detriment or your saving grace. The odds say one thing, but what if they miss? In other RPGs, it feels kind of bad when you miss an attack. In Fire Emblem, the misses feel far worse, because it was a calculated decision that became ineffective. Something that set Fire Emblem apart from Famicom Wars is that all your soldiers are individuals. Every soldier had a name, a face, and an implied personality. In Fire Emblem, your various units could be different class types, each with a different movement radius on the map and attack in different ways. Because everyone is a different person, they all have strengths and weaknesses. Selecting a unit will show the stats that will affect the various conditions in battle. As you might guess, there is a way to increase these stats. Your units gain experience after each battle if they land an attack successfully. However, if they defeat an enemy, they will gain far more. After a unit gains 100 experience points, they will level up, usually increasing their stats and making them even stronger. Usually. Inventory management was another important piece of your strategy. Every unit had 4 inventory slots, 5 in the remake, so bringing only what is necessary is key. It's also wise to do routine checkups on everyone's belongings. Weapons break after being used too many times, so it's best to make sure they are replaced with spares when appropriate. It's also not a bad idea to have everyone carrying a healing vulnerary, just in case. But that also needs to be balanced out with spare weapons if they're about to break down, or any other supporting items that might be useful. This is also why you need to be careful and pick your units for battle wisely. One of the series' biggest staples is permanent death. If any of your units fall in battle, they are gone for good. The only character who cannot truly die is Marth. Should he fall, you will be automatically forced into a fail state, requiring a restart of the chapter. Everyone else is fair game, and should they fall, the game will continue on as normal. Since every character in the game is a person, it hurts more when they fall. I'm not a big fan of the permanent death features in Fire Emblem, but I will fully admit they have their place. Fire Emblem is a game about war, and war has its stakes. By playing with the flames of war, there will be consequences. And this might mean the death of an ally. However, it doesn't take a veteran or a genius to figure out ways to circumvent this punishment. For a time, the only possible way of doing this was to restart the chapter you're currently on and not make the same mistake in your previous run, allowing you to rethink your strategy and save that character from their previous fate. Many fans of Fire Emblem, including myself, typically play their first runs of the game with this in mind. Determining how to play the game based on permanent death would spark considerations in design, leading to intelligent systems to encourage more playstyles moving forward. With something as high stakes as the survival of your allies, The map design should be well constructed to be challenging, but also fair so that you can be rewarded for your tactical prowess. For the most part, Shadow Dragon's maps succeed in this regard. Every mission requires Marth to make it to some point on the map, be it a castle gates, a throne, or fort. Battlefields are never too large to be overwhelming, which is important for this mission type, and they provide enough of a challenge to be satisfactory. They aren't the most taxing chapters you'll find in a strategy game, but I seldom ever felt bored. Bringing the right units to the right maps will also go a long way in making them easier. Deserts slow down most units, but mages and flyers are unaffected, making them ideal for that situation. Skilled or knowledgeable players will be rewarded by making it to villages and treasure chests, which have valuable items that can be theirs to use. Get there fast though. Enemy thieves will gladly take what you don't. There's enough of a core challenge here to present what are honestly some pretty good maps, and also rewarding skilled players. Yet one huge flaw the DS Remake fails to balance from the original game is the fact that you can break nearly every map in the game by warping north to the boss and seizing the throne within a minimum of 1 or 2 turns. Another problem is the enemies can be real tough. Sometimes my strongest people could not take a basic mook out on their own. I actually like this in theory, because it requires you to be thoughtful in unit positioning and experience distribution. But this is a pretty consistent problem the game has. It can be pretty annoying, especially if people miss attacks. Those aren't some of the nastiest shenanigans though. Chapter 12 is a mission that's all about dealing with ballistas. This chapter is really annoying, because there's no good way to approach it. I like that they put in a village and a recruitable unit to prevent the player from using cheese strats, but taking sometimes unavoidable damage is not fun. My first time playing this game, I was thrown off by what isn't in Shadow Dragon as opposed to other Fire Emblems. Features like support bonuses and rescuing are completely absent. The one mission objective also made this game feel like it lacked variety. There was something that felt kinda dull about Shadow Dragon upon initial viewing, but playing it again, there's actually quite a bit here that does a lot of favors in making it easier to play, especially now that I have some knowledge on what the original Famicom version was like. Saying that the DS Remake is basically a graphical upgrade of the original game is true in some ways, but ignorant of the rest. Features that were introduced later in the series that were brought back to Shadow Dragon DS include new character classes, Marth carrying the convoy's items as opposed to a tent shop that costs money to use, Master Seals replacing the individual promotion items for each class, healers getting experience after using staves, save points on the map that can be reloaded at any time, the ability to change a unit's class, skipping enemy phases, and the weapons triangle. The game flow is also retooled and sped up to resemble the later games in the series, which alone makes it much more accessible than the original versions. Shadow Dragon DS does put a lot in to make it more tolerable, but also maintains Fire Emblem at its basic format to demonstrate the inherent strength of its game flow. It's a strategy game that really encourages you to make the best move, since it offers so little in the way of salvaging a potential mistake. Even still, Fire Emblem is a series that I love dearly, and I always want to do what I can to help people who might be interested find an outlet. So if you've never touched a Fire Emblem game before, and you wanted to try out Shadow Dragon, for whatever reason, would it be an enjoyable time? Is the original version worth playing? No. But is the updated Shadow Dragon for DS more favorable? Many fans of the series would say to avoid this game altogether, as it's the weakest game in the series. However, I would argue that's a benefit for newcomers. Anyone jumping on here would only be getting better Fire Emblem experiences as they play the other games, making it a great springboard for the people who catch on. I've known people who only ever played Shadow Dragon when I first met them, and they really enjoyed their time with it. The game from start to finish, if you play the DS Remake, will only last about 15 to 20 hours to finish, so long as you aren't constantly restarting chapters. It isn't too much of a time commitment to make your way through. The flip side, however, is that there isn't much here to justify replaying this game again, if that's of some concern to you. It's also a great benefit of this game that it follows the story of Marth, a character from the series that many people are familiar with. Even if they haven't played one of the games before, that previously established connection might serve as a sort of selling point for this game. Even though, fair warning, he's a pretty inconsistent character without anything to make him interesting or complex. In fact, the best character trait to describe him with is dense, which is kinda sad, but whatever! Looking at this game on its own, without the context of the rest of the series, there isn't too much to complain about. But if you're already knee-deep into strategy games but just have not happened to play Fire Emblem yet, then Shadow Dragon is admittedly a harder sell. If what you're looking for is a deeper story, great character interactions, or more compelling gameplay than what was described in the video, then consider other games in the series. Yet, I still think that Shadow Dragon is a great recommendation for a newcomer to the series or strategy games. Just know that if you are thinking about starting here, you are playing the weakest Fire Emblem experience. But no knowledge of the rest of the series is required to fully enjoy the story of this game, so you won't have that to worry about. So looking back on this game once again, I can say with confidence that it's alright. Even though I primarily played the remake, Shadow Dragon was still a good time overall. What is there feels a little too basic for its own good, though for the game it was trying to be in 1990, I think that's alright. As a game, it could be more exciting and thought out. But as a foundation, it would be key to creating one of the best series Nintendo has in their possession. By this year's end, a new Fire Emblem game will be upon us. I'm incredibly excited for whatever this game will turn out to be, so I want to find a position where I can be ready to look at Fire Emblem 16 with the most optimal critique that I can provide. I want to take a little journey with this series, and if you're willing, I want you to join me as well. Let us take a look at the entire series together, figure out how it has evolved, and what is it that makes Fire Emblem so special. Join me next time as we take a little sidestep to view a brand new story. Thank you so much for watching, and may the RNG be rolled in your favor.